Hi y'all, 3-foot Lego guy here. It is finally time on this day, on the birth of our nation's railway, to reveal my US 250 model, which I've been very excited to show off. So, here it is. This is Sumter Valley Caboose number 3. And if you're confused as to why it is my US 250 model, it's time to dive into the prototype history. Before I dig into the actual prototype, I want to talk about the railroad itself. The Sumter Valley Railroad was a gold railroad, originally built for the gold rush in the Sumter Valley, which would later die out and become commercialized through the use of dredge mining. However, while the gold was running out, it was decided that logging Eastern Oregon would actually be profitable enough for the railroad to continue. And as such, it would continue to expand until, actually, the mid-1910s when the railroad would reach Austin, Oregon, being over 100 miles long. However, hard times came through the Depression, and things were not looking good for the railroad until they eventually acquired the 2 Uinta simple articulated locomotives, which helped them increase productivity by only making one long train run from Bates, Oregon, all the way back to Baker City, the headquarters for both the lumber companies they served and for the railroad. When this happened, it spelled the sad end, actually, of the railroad, as by the end of the war, there was really not much left for the railroad to do, as logging started to shift from railroad to road through the use of trucks. And so, the railroad, as most people would recognize, closed in the late 40s. However, the logging mill still needed to be switched, so a small small narrow gauge locomotive with dual gauge couplers would switch the Sumter yard, or rather the Baker City yard, until the early 1960s, when then finally narrow gauge operations fell. Less than 10 years later, however, an opportunity presented itself to some of the Sumter Valley volunteers, or what would become them. The Heisler from one of the lumber companies, which was owned by the Sumter Valley, had come up for sale. And so they trucked the engine back from Idaho to Oregon, rebuilt it over a period of 5 years. And eventually, on July 4th, this very day, 50 years ago, they reopened as the Sumter Valley Railroad instead of Railway, and from that day on have continued the preservation of the railroad in acquiring more rolling stock, more locomotives, and, in this case, Caboose 3. So let's now dig into Caboose 3's history. Caboose 3's history is a bit murky and unknown. Not only was it not photographed as much as the other cabooses 4, 5, and 6, it also, for whatever reason, is not known whether it was built by the Sumter Valley shops themselves or if it came from an earlier car from the Oregon Short Line Railroad, which was earlier the Utah Northern Railroad. Regardless, the caboose was on roster by 1916 and was later rebuilt in 1927, becoming a little bit longer and a little bit shorter in height. It would serve faithfully until the early 40s when it was deemed surplus following the acquisition of the Uinta locomotives, at which point it was sold to the White Pass and Yukon route, which at the time was under control by the U.S. government, as there was a lot of protection and worry that Alaska would be invaded, and as such, that railroad was having a kind of gold rush just in terms of how much equipment went up there. Caboose 3 served faithfully until 1946, when it was deemed surplus by the railroad and by the U.S. Army and was sold to be a bunkhouse in someone's backyard in Skagway. However, it was reacquired in the 80s, and by the 90s was back up in operating condition, and to this day serves as the primary caboose run by the Sumter Valley Railroads, until this year when Caboose 5 was restored to operation, at which point Caboose 3 should be pulled out of service and be given a love and rebuild over the next few years, which is the hope. Now, let's go on to my Lego model. So now with the history out of the way, let's actually go into the prototype. So this prototype is unique as it is not the finalized version that I will be releasing for instructions. So I want to explain why. So originally, I was having some issues making this caboose. In fact, I actually have a very early draft, which I'll be showing later towards the end of the video, that was absolutely horrid and was my first draft. But in doing so, I crafted this caboose many times. Eventually, I got fed up and was like, okay, I want to build this. And I approached a dear friend of mine, TK, or Red Railroader, as he is now known. And he agreed to help finance the building of this caboose and the building of 2 other copies. One for himself, because he is a volunteer at the Sumter Valley, and another one as a joint donation between myself and him. So this was the first one I built, because I wanted the honor of doing that. And as such, there are some changes. Compared to Caboose 3, the trucks are all black, which is not prototypical. They should in fact be red with black wheels, as should the bracing on the frame. That should also be red. So that has been rectified in the digital version, which I will show shortly. Also, what has changed is the steps right here, as well as the side, not the inside, but the, what's that word? I'm blanking. Balcony. The balcony of the caboose, or whatever you would call it, is also red when it should be light bluish gray, as I determined that to be the best color match. The other thing is, when I originally built this caboose, the inside of the cupola was empty, and it still is, but you can barely see it in there. There are plates in there because the caboose was not connected to the rest of the frame due to me using such short plates, which meant it was not structurally sound whatsoever. In doing so, I got some 2x6 plates I had on hand, reconnected everything, so it is now stable. And other than that, the caboose is a pretty simple model. It basically comes in about 4 sections. The body itself, the roof, which is connected at these ends right here, and then the trucks, which are very removable and actually have a unique property that I would like to show off real quick. So the trucks were designed to be able to pivot. So going around corners, I can show it on this one. They will stick out, which can be an issue. But I have tested this caboose on curves as small as R40, and it runs fine. I would not recommend it. You can probably do R72 just fine. This caboose has regularly taken R88 with no issues. But R104 is my personally recommended thing. Regardless, I designed these trucks so that if you bought plastic axles from Lego and made this a fully purist build, you could push the wheels in narrower and actually make it a narrow gauge caboose. I put ball bearings on my copy just at the moment. My goal is to buy custom ball bearings, or at least axle lengths, so this will be narrow gauge at some point. But pretty solid build. I do want to change the trucks as they're not prototypical. Lastly, on this version of the model, as well as the one that will be posted, there is no interior. That was done intentionally, as I realized there were so many changes I wanted to make to this model, and even the one I built digitally, that I knew I had to just redo the caboose completely. But as far as I'm aware, it is fairly faithful to both its 1916 and 1927 length, width, and height-wise. It might be a little too tall, but that's the fun of it. So yeah, let me go over to the digital version and show you the changes I've made and what you can be able to buy to support the railroad. Now, we're in studio, so let's go over the changes I made. Right off the bat, you will notice that I have changed the steps to be light bluish gray, as well as the platforms, which is more accurate to the prototype. On top of that, I have also removed a brake handle from this longer end, as historically, Caboose 3 only has a brake handle on one end, which was quite a shock to me until TK pointed it out. As such, I made that change. There is still no interior, but, which I can show you real quick. We're going to go inside. Whee! Here you go. There's no interior. The doors are modeled. I also did add this chain here, as would be prototypical on the Caboose today, just to protect passengers from falling off. So that is gone. And then I changed the underframe, and due to part availability, excuse me, I also added a little bit of weathering on the trucks. That's why there's reddish brown for this antenna part. And I tried to blend it in as best I could, hence why there's also other reddish brown parts. Oh, and then I added this little stud, like anti-stud on top of the marker lights. And then I made the roof a bit sturdier by using bigger plates, which will cost more, but I think in the long run it'll be great. My favorite change, however, actually came from this. So on my physical version, the stovepipe for the Caboose is actually farther out than it should be. It should actually be basically on the gangway, but sadly there's too much collision, so I had to optimize as best I can how to make that work. So it's about a half stud off, which isn't ideal, but I've got a few renders of it poking out the window, as you can see here, and it looks pretty darn close to the actual thing. So with that in mind, those are all the changes I've made. Apologies for the abrupt ending on that last clip. I was having audio issues with OBS, and I was also having some other issues. Regardless though, the model that you saw digitally, as well as this, which is structurally the same thing, will retail with just instructions for $8. This is 614 parts, and you will get just the instructions, a parts list to be able to build it however you may wish. If you are savvy enough, you can obviously recolor it to Caboose 5, which is practically the same thing. I'll be very interested to see what happens. But yeah, I'm really excited to see this project done. And now on to some thank yous. First, I'd like to thank James B., the head of the Sumter Valley Archives and its caretaker, for posting so many pictures about the Sumter Valley. Without your contributions online, this video would not be possible, nor would my documentation of Caboose 3 be so precise. Next, I would like to thank ShipRail for giving me encouragement and advice on building this Caboose as I slowly worked through it all of last year. I'd also like to thank Steam Up Bricks for giving me inspiration and teaching me a lot of techniques that actually went into this build, most notably how to curve hoses, which digitally is very difficult. And lastly, I am eternally grateful for Yellow LXF for allowing me to use his cupola design and for giving me the blessing to use it and to sell instructions on this model. Without him, it would not be possible for this to happen. Lastly, I would like to thank TK, or Red-Headed Railroader. I called him Red Railroader earlier. I apologize. But this model originally started because I wanted to go up to the Sumter Valley for the 50th this year. I did not get the opportunity, but that led to me talking to Red-Headed Railroader, and it's blossomed into a glorious friendship that I very much am grateful to have, and cannot wait to see what happens next with that. So hopefully someday we'll meet up and we will unite all three Caboose for one long train. And lastly, I'm grateful for the Sumter Valley itself, for the wonderful preservation work they do, and for the wonderful prototypes that I model. I hope that I've done the railroad justice in my covering in this video. I know I've gotten a few things wrong, most likely, but I hope that I can spread the word out there and help the railroad any way I can.
This model was made by a friend of mine named Mr. who also wished that he could get up here, but sadly was not able to because of outside circumstances. On his behalf, I hereby present this Lego model of the Sumter Valley Railway, number 3, to the Sumter Valley Railway. Thank you very much.